Math. Okay. So now, after the digestive system, since we have already discussed the different parts, medyo sadali lang naman kasi ang digestive system. Hindi siya masyado ganun ka-elaborate na ano. Pagdating nyo ng college, if you're going to take biology, siguro i-elaborate pa nila. And then the different enzymes, the different acids that is involved in the digestion, the different muscle activity, and so on. Ayan. So today, we will be discussing about genetics and history of genetics and how it works. Okay, so let's start. Ayan. So heredity and genetics, both are different terms and have different definitions, but then there are interrelated with each other. So why do we look like the way we do? Bakit may mga twins? Bakit we look different from other people? We look different from our parents. Ayan. So those are what we ask when it comes to genetics and heredity. Kasi nga, di ba, sabi nila namamana daw. Namamana yung looks ng nanay, namamana yung looks ng tatay, namamana ang ugali, namamana yung kulay ng buhok, and so on. Okay. So what is heredity? Let's start with heredity. So heredity is the passing of traits from one generation to the next. So ibig sabihin, kung ano yung traits ng parents mo, maaari nilang maipasa ito sa'yo, sa kapatid mo, and so on. Pero most of the time, daughter cells talaga or offsprings tend to inherit the traits coming from parents, both parents. Hindi lang si tatay, hindi lang si nanay, but both of them will have, kumbaga, may ambag sila sa kung ano yung kabuuang ikaw. Yan. So, no matter it might be physical or it might be inner self mo or yung ugali mo. Pero kapag when we are talking about genetics, it's mostly yung physical traits. So a trait is a specific characteristic that is unique, that is unique. Traits affect the way we look, traits affect how our bodies function, and traits are inherited. Examples are hair color, eye color, handedness, kung left or right-handedness, kung left or right-handed ka, most of the time, minsan hindi namamana ito hindi namamana ito from the parents but from the lolo and lola and some of the tita, which is still coming from your parents, but then it's a different trait kasi may dalawa tayong types of trait. Malalaman natin yan later on. Okay. So let's focus for this topic, the Mendelian genetics. Kasi may dalawa tayong genetics. We have the Mendelian and then we have the non-Mendelian genetics. For the Mendelian, it follows the laws coming from the Mendelian genetics itself. Kasi nga, Mendelian genetics was discovered, named after the discoverer, who is Gregor Mendel. So si Gregor Mendel is considered to be the father of genetics. Siya yung nag-discover ng process of genetics. So si Gregor Mendel, just a short story, si Gregor Mendel is a priest or siya, pastor. Hindi ko lang alam kung Catholic pa siya, pero I know he is Christian. So he was the one who is fascinated with how things work, or especially when it comes to passing on the traits from parent to offspring. So because of him, he discovered, or he researched about the different traits of different types of peas, or yung parang tawag natin dito, green peas, yung ganon. Yung gulay na peas. Okay. Hindi yung peas na kapayapaan, gulay. Ayan. So peas, when it comes to that experiment, siya talaga yung nag-discover doon, wherein he cross-pollinated peas from different varieties. Example, merong peas na nag-bear ng pink flowers. And then there are peas na nagbe-bear ng white flowers. Some peas are bigger and then some peas are smaller. So yung ginawa niya, he was able to crossbreed between peas, one specific pea to another. Okay. So but sadly, hindi ito nakuha ni Gregor Mendel while he is still alive. So 20 years, 200 years, no, 20 years later, after niyang namatay, dun pa lang na-discover na totoo pala ang theory niya when eventually it became a law na about genetics na ipapasa pala ang trait ng parent to offspring. Ayan. So doon napatunayan ang theory ni Gregor Mendel that it is possible or it is the way genetics work. Ayan. So punta na tayo with Mendelian Genetics. So Gregor Mendel was an Augustinian monk. Monk pala siya who lived in the late 19th century and through studying peas, developed the basis of the science of genetics still used today. So wala pa ring bagong paraan o pamamaraan to discover the science of genetics, but still it is still being used what Gregor Mendel has discovered. So at once I've said, sayang kasi hindi niya nakuha yung praise or hindi niya nakuha yung recognition na dapat niyang makuha while he is still alive. So 20 years after pa siyang namatay, 20 years later after siya namatay, doon pa lang siya naka-receive ng award which is the Nobel Peace Prize. So ang Nobel Peace Prize is one of the most prestigious prize na ibinibigay sa isang tao or scientist na nakadiscover ng panibagong breakthrough when it comes to science and technology. Ayan. So examine the peas you planted. How many different traits do you see? 4, 5, 6, or 7. So screenshot from the animated activity called Mendel's Peas. So this can be found online. Specifically, meron siya sa fet.com. Yes, fet.ca. Yeah, so fet.ca, wherein nag-experiment siya na kino-crossbreed yung different types of peas. For this, meron tayong apat. Isa, dalawa, tatlo, apat. 5. So, how many different traits do you see? Ayan, so different traits kasi iba-iba yung bunga niya. Ayan, iba yung flowers, iba yung bunga, and so on. Okay, so let's move on. So these are the things, or these are the peas that he experimented on. So round or wrinkled ripe seed, meron kasing peas na nagbe-bear ng wrinkled seed. Meron, yes. And then meron din namang round or yung bilog siya. Hindi siya ganun kakulubot. Meron din naman yellow or green seed interiors. And then we have purple and white petals, and then inflated or pinch ripe pods. Tulad nito, may korte yung pods. And then this one doesn't have green or yellow unripe pods. Hindi pa siya luto, pero may yellow na siya. And then there are, hindi pa luto, but then it is green. And eggshell or terminal flowers. Ibig sabihin, there are flowers. For eggshell, it has flowers all over the plants. And for terminal, nasa taas lang siya. Or it is in one spot only. So long or short stems. Meron mahaba and then merong maliit. Okay, so what kinds of traits are there? So meron lang tayong dalawang trait. We can have dominant or recessive. So dominant traits are traits that are seen by the naked eye or pwede siyang ma-observe through observing just the person or just a thing. Example, si Althea ay maganda. Ayan, she has long hair, she has tawag dito, chinita eyes, she has red lips. Ayan, so those are dominant traits. Ibig sabihin, nakikita siya from the eye of the observer. So, ayan, traits that are always expressed or shown. So examples are brown hair, brown eyes, right-handed, and so on. So recessive traits naman are traits na hindi gaano or hindi talaga siya nakikita for now. But then it is there. Hindi pwedeng mawala yan. A recessive trait is a trait that is covered up or seem to disappear. So hindi siya mostly kita. Examples are blonde hair, blue eyes, left-handed. Okay, so these traits are seldom na makikita when it comes to offspring. Example, you have a Filipino woman and then yung husband niya is a British person. Ayan. So yung British na asawa niya is blonde and then has blue eyes. While the Filipina has black hair and brown eyes. Ayan, so nag-unstable. Black hair and brown eyes yung Filipina. Most of the time, 80 to 90% ng magiging anak nila will have the trait of black hair and brown eyes. Ayan, so those are mostly the dominant gene. But then there will be an offspring na merong blonde hair and then blue eyes. Sometimes, mostly it is paired always na blonde and then blue eyes. Hindi pwedeng blonde and then brown eyes. Hindi pwedeng ganon. So those are some of the recessive traits. Ayan. So recessive inheritance. So recessive inheritance in a mating of normal gray and pied using a pied in second generation. Okay, so we have this one. Wherein nag-mix na silang dalawa, pareho na. And then this one, ayan. So recessive yung lumabas na genes. It is paired with the dominant and then the recessive. So lahat sila nagkaroon ng dominant gene. But then do not use this hand as pied. Sorry. Confusing siya, no? I will simplify this later. Ayan. So again, sa mga bagong pasok, good morning. Ayan. Medyo confusing ito kasi hindi siya naka-Punnett Square. Mas maganda kapag naka-Punnett Square siya. Pero explain ko na din. Okay, so yung first generation crossbreed, ito yung mga naging anak nila. So normal, split pied, and then do not use this hens, use as pied. Ayan. So we have 50-50%. So 50% of this one, and then 50% of this one. Kasi nga, dominant pa rin sila. They are still dominant. Yun talaga ang lalabas. Hindi masyado itong lalabas. For the second generation, na kung saan ito ang gagamitin natin, which has this BB trait, and then the next one is this BB trait, it will be 50-50. So 50% ng recessive, and then 50% ng may dominant. Okay. So where do traits come from? Okay, so factors that make up an individual come from both parents. Hindi pwedeng isa lang. Example, sabihin, oy, kamukha mo talaga si papa mo. Hindi pwedeng, hindi lang si papa mo ang pinagkunan ng traits mo. But hindi natin alam, there are recessive traits coming from your mom. So, eventually, sa magiging anak mo, lalabas yung traits ng nanay mo sa kanila. But then, it is not guaranteed that it is 100% na lalabas ang traits ng mother mo na hindi nakita sa'yo sa magiging offspring mo. There is an 70 to 90% chance na lalabas talaga ang traits ng parents mo na hindi nakita sa'yo. Ayan. But then, most of the time, lalabas pa rin yung dominant trait wherein coming from your father. Ayan. Example. The trait information is passed on from generation to generation in the form of genes. Ayan. So, trait ang naipapasa through genes. So, saan makikita ang genes natin? Ang genes natin ay makikita sa ating DNA. DNA, makikita naman ang DNA sa ating chromosomes. Okay. So, a normal person, a normal individual will have 46 pairs of genes, 46 pairs of chromosomes. So, For female, it will have the X and X chromosome. For male, they will have the X and Y chromosomes. But then let's focus first with genes. So a gene is a specific location on a chromosome that controls a certain trait. Example nga yung genes. Yung trait na ipinasa sa'yo is black hair. Kasi nga, from both parents, meron silang parehong black hair. And then this gene is parang ano siya, parang control center na dapat kapag naipasa siya, ito yung magiging kontrolado niyang kulay ng buhok. So ganun, those are genes. So saan ba nagmumula ang genes? So an individual needs 2 genes for each trait, 1 gene from each parent. Kahit tulad nga ng nakita nyo kanina doon sa mga ibon, we have the B and the B. So parehong merong dalawa, merong isa ang magiging anak nila. Example, merong big letter B sa tatay, then small letter B sa nanay. So yung small letter B ng nanay, may papasa pa rin sa'yo. Ibig sabihin na puro B lang ang matatanggap mo sa parehong from nanay and tatay. So this genes pair is called alleles. So one gene comes from the sperm cell from the father, and one gene comes from the egg cell from the mother. So those are alleles. Huwag kayong ma-confuse. Kasi ako, hindi ko masasabi ito na hindi kayo pwedeng ma-confuse kasi ako na-confuse din ako when it comes to traits, genes, and then alleles. Ayan. So genes are gene pair. A gene pair is called an allele. So how do genes get their information? Saan pa nakukuha ito? So a chromosome is a structure in the cell that contains the genetic information. As what I've said, doon makikita ang ating DNA sa ating chromosomes. And the DNA is the basic structure of life. Kung saan, dito din makikita ang ating genes. So this information is passed from one generation to the next generation. Ayan. So, ayan, si gene 1 and then gene 2. And then, mahabang-mahaba ang ating DNA. Therefore, nakalagay dyan ang different genes na pwedeng matanggap natin from our parents. So, the chromosome and the gene. Ayan. For each chromosome hand, itong fingers na ito, meron siyang corresponding na DNA. So, doon natin makahanap ang ating genes. So, gene representation. How do we write our genetics? Paano ba natin sinusulat ang ating genes? So, the name of the dominant trait determines what letter is used to represent the gene. Ayan. So, use a capital of the first letter of the dominant trait to represent the dominant gene. Example, black. Ang first letter ng black is B, and then ibibig letter lang natin siya. Use small version of the first letter of the dominant trait for the recessive gene, or small letter. Example, blonde. Blonde ang mama mo. And then, susulat natin yung blonde as small letter B kasi nga recessive. Example, right-handedness is dominant trait, so use R, big letter R, for the dominant gene and use small letter R for the recessive gene for left-handedness. So, hindi pala siya naka-ano, sorry. Hindi naka-share, sorry. Wait lang. Ayan. Example 2 naman, tall is the dominant trait. So we use T and we use T for the recessive. We use big letter T and we use small letter T for the recessive gene for short. Ayan. So how are genes expressed? Okay. So traits are how genes show, and since traits are formed from 2 genes, they are described by the combination of genes that make pair, which is called the allele. So traits are described as either homogeneous or heterogeneous. Example for homogeneous, parehong dominant. Example, your mom has black hair and then your dad has black hair. So pareho silang B na big letter and then B na big letter din from both mom and dad. So yung alleles nila is called what we call pure. And then the heterogeneous naman kapag a mixture of um, a mixture of dominant and then the recessive gene. So homozygous are pure or homogeneous. Pure dominant, the individual only has genes of the dominant trait. Pwede din itong pure recessive, parehong recessive. So example, T and then big letter T and then big letter T. A pure tall individual has only tall big letter T genes. And then we have what we call the pure recessive. The individual only has genes of the recessive traits. So example is small letter T and then small letter T. A pure short individual has only short genes. Okay. So heterozygous naman is mixed. Yeah. So a heterozygous individual has one dominant gene and one recessive gene or trait. The result is the dominant gene is the one expressed or shown. So kahit na heterozygous tayo na or heterogeneous na genes, the alleles, it will still show the dominant gene. Example, for both tall and short genes, ang tall pa rin ang makikita. But then they have the pair wherein pareho silang may short gene. That is why merong family, example, puro tall sila. Puro tall sila sa nila. Puro tall yung magkakapatid niya. Tapos, nanganak sila ulit and then the next offspring is short. Ibig sabihin, may isa sa parents na merong short na gene. Ayan. So, ibig sabihin, naipasa nila doon sa anak nilang huli yung short na gene or doon nakita doon sa anak nilang huli. Okay. So, how do we predict offspring? Paano natin malalaman kung ano yung magiging traits ng offspring natin? We use the tool called the Punnett Square. So Punnett Square is a way to show the possible combinations of genes that offspring of parents could have. So ito ay hindi na part ng discovery ni Gregor Mendel. But then, Punnett is a different person wherein he developed the Punnett Square, kung saan ito ay nagpe-predict ng magiging offspring ng two parents. Example, ang female natin na alleles or female gametes natin, mali na naman yung gamit ko ng word na allele. Allele has to be a pair from both parents and from both male and female gametes. So yung gametes is the sex cells. Ayan. So female gametes has big letter E and the small letter E, while the male gametes has big letter E and the small letter E, the same. So there is a chance that we will have three children that are containing the dominant gene, which is the big letter E, and one child that contains small letter E, or yung recessive gene. This means that itong mga magiging anak nito will have the same possibility that they will have the same the same offspring. Ayan, so magkakaroon sila ng homozygous or homogeneous na pure dominant, and then they will have a heterozygous or heterogeneous, and then they will have pure recessive. So ibig sabihin, 25% ng pure dominant, 50% ng heterozygous or heterogeneous, and then 25% ng pure recessive. Kung ganito ang magiging genes nila. Pero what if? Ayan, so ganun din. Pareho din. Ayan. So for this naman, it's medyo complicated ito. So hindi na natin, let's not dwell on this kasi dadaanan lang naman natin. These are examples of how we use the Punnett Square. Ayan. As for this, example ito, we have the SSY for the female gametes, and the SSYY for the male gametes. Kasi yung ginamit niya is pinair muna ito, and then pinair ito, and then they paired it heterozygous. So pinair ito with this, and then pinair ito with this, and then pinair ito with this, and then pinair ito with this. Okay? So ganon. Okay, so let's go to phenotype. Phenotyping na tayo. So what is a phenotype? Yan. So phenotype is the way that we look or appear. Example, we have brown eyes, blonde hair, tall. Ayan. So black eyes, white eyes, black eyes. Okay. So we have this one. Ayan. So we have, pareho silang may B, and then this one has B, and then alleles will have this one, white. White yung dominant natin. And this one will have black kasi ito yung dominant. Okay. What is genotype naman? Genotype is a genetic makeup for a trait. Example, homozygous brown, or we have pure brown. Ayan. So those are genotype. So phenotype is how we look or kung gaano siya nakita sa physical, paano siya nakikita ng observer physically, and then genotype is the genetic makeup. Or example, kung ano yung mga magiging magiging genes nila. Ayan. So we have genotype, RR, we have the recessive, pure recessive, and then we have the pure dominant. Genotype is this one. Kung ano yung itsura niya, kung red flower ba siya, or white flower, or pink flower, and so on. Ayan. So brown phenotype, we have BR genotype. We have the blue eye phenotype, which is BL genotype. Ayan. Okay, so ayan. So we have a comparison wherein ang parents natin is handedness, ang trait na kino-compare natin. So right-handed parents, we have pure dominant right-handedness, and then we have the homozygous right-handedness or homogeneous right-handedness. So there is a 100% na right-handed ang magiging offspring nila. Kasi nga parehong it contains the recessive, the dominant genes. So genotype natin is 50% RR or homozygous right, 50% RR, which is heterozygous right, and then 0% recessive, homozygous left. So walang recessive na magiging anak. Walang magiging left-handed na anak. Okay. For height naman, pareho silang heterozygous. So as what I said kanina, ang phenotype nila is 75% na tall kasi nga 75% na merong dominant gene. So 25, 25, 25, 75. So and then 25% ang phenotype nila is short. Well, for genotypes naman, it will have 24% na dominant homozygous tall, 50% heterozygous tall kasi nga nasa ano pa rin, dominant T pa rin na height, which is tall. And then 25% homozygous na recessive, which is short. Yeah. So alam niyo na kung paano na yun. Okay, so what is incomplete dominance? So incomplete dominance naman is when neither gene that determines a trait dominates, so the recessive trait is not fully hidden. So hindi ibig sabihin na incomplete dominance, kasi nga this is just an example na kung saan makikita pa rin ang recessive gene niya. So example, nag-mix tayo ng genetic trait that is neither dominant nor recessive. Ayan. So, kapag nag-mix tayo ng parehong pure dominant na R and then pure dominant na white, nag-mix na lang sila. This is because of the incomplete dominance. Nag-mix sila yung red and then white, it became pink. So kapag nag-mix tayo ng white and black, magiging gray yung magiging anak nila. Ayan. So how do genes control traits? Or we have what we call the DNA or the deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA is the instruction code that the genes use to form traits. DNA is long thread of material found in all cells. DNA contains the master code that instruct all cells in their daily jobs. So, DNA ng isang tao or ng isang organism could last millions of years as long as hindi ito makakontaminate. Example, pag nagmamify tayo ng mga ng pag nagmamify tayo ng isang mummy or ng isang tao, what happens is yung genes or yung traits na nasa loob ng tao is napipreserve. Kahit nga nasa labas, napipreserve siya para hindi siya magamit for the long run. Fossils, which has been on Earth, na ano na siya, na-preserve siya, we call them fossils, still contains DNA strand, but then it is difficult for us to determine kung ano yung DNA nila. It will be rigorous work, medyo matagal siyang trabaho, and then matagal siyang madaming process na gagamitin. That is how DNA works. So, meron din tayong, example, we have cloning. So, yung cloning naman is an example wherein it replicates DNA. Kung ano yung DNA na meron sa isang organism, parang pinotocopy mo siya. So, yung DNA na meron yung isang organism, na ipasa siya as the same copy by using the DNA of that organism. Ayan. So, genes are short pieces of DNA that make up our chromosomes. So, each piece of DNA that is related to a gene makes up one trait. Ayan. So, hindi ibig sabihin na isang DNA strand siya, isang gene lang siya. Ibig sabihin, madami siyang compilation ng gene. Parang ano siya, parang file cabinet. Ayan. Parang file cabinet of genes ang ating DNA. Okay, so structure of DNA, this is not included with the heredity. Included pa din siya, but then, hindi na siya ganun ka-prominent. Okay. Okay, so let's continue with the lesson. Okay, so I will show you another example of how we use the Punnett Square. Mag-share screen ako ng whiteboard natin. Okay, so paano ba tayo nag-uumpisa ng Punnett Square? So example, we have the given, hahanapin nating trait is, ang hahanapin nating trait is black hair. Ayan. Sorry. Hair color. Hair color. Okay. So, meron tayong given from both parents. Meron silang binigay na yung tatay has dominant black hair. Pure dominant black hair. So, ibig sabihin, we have BB as pure dominant black. Okay. So, we have BB as pure dominant black, and then yung nanay has black hair din, but then it has a recessive of brown hair. So, meron tayong BB. Ayan. So, we have heterogeneous black. Okay. So, ibig sabihin, may recessive siyang brown hair. Okay. So, using the Punnett Square, ano ang gagawin natin? Ayan. So, this is what we call the 3x3 Punnett Square. Okay. So, wait lang. Simple lang. Okay, so this is the 3x3 Punnett Square. Okay. So what we do first is ilalagay natin yung gametes ng parents sa taas and then sa babae. Sa taas yung babae and then sa gilid yung lalaki, yung lalaking genes natin. So what we do is, okay. So ito yung nilagay natin dito is the X or minumultiply natin yung parents kasi nga pinagmimix natin yung ah dito, dalawang alleles. Okay. Dalawang gametes pala. Sorry, namamali na naman ako. Okay. Ayan. So ano yung una-una nating gagawin? Ang isusulat muna natin is the letters doon sa male and female nating gametes. For female, meron tayong big letter black and then small letter na B, na the recessive one. This is the brown one, the brown color. Now, susulat na natin yung genes or yung gametes ng lalaki, which is pure black siya. Pure dominant black. Ayan. So, ibig sabihin pareho siyang may dominant gene. Now, what we do is, minimix natin yung, we cross this one. Kung ano yung i-multiply natin yung female to male. Example, lalagay na muna natin yung male, and then the next one will be the female. Ayan. The next one naman is ilalagay natin ito here. Ayan. So, ganyan yung ginagawa natin. Ayan. So, this will have big letter B, and then the small letter B. Ayan. The next one naman is this one. It's this one. And this one. Ayan. That will give us a pure dominant black. And then this one is this one and this one. That will give us okay. So who can tell me the phenotype of these results? What is the phenotype of their offspring? Ibig sabihin, di ba nga kanina sabi natin, ang B is black, the big letter B is black, and the small letter B is brown. Who can tell me what is the phenotype of these results? May nakikita ba kayong parehong small letter na B? Meron, wala. Example, parehong wala. So therefore, what will be our phenotype? It will be, ano? %? 100% ano? Anong kulay? %100% anong kulay? Hello? 100% na anong kulay? Okay, so 100% na black. But if we are going to be using the Geno, it will be Meron tayong 50% ng black dominant, and then 50% na, sorry, 50% na hetero black. Okay. So, ayan yung geno natin. We have the pheno, which is 100% black kasi nga, black ang dominant genes natin sa lahat. We have the black dominant gene. And then, for geno, we have 50% black dominant, pure black dominant, and then pure, sorry, pure. Let go pure. Okay, pure black dominant, and then 50% na hetero black na na genotype. Okay, so ibig sabihin nito, walang anak na magkakaroon ng brown hair. Siguro sa susunod. Ayan. So that is how the Punnett Square works. Okay, ready na ba sa activity? May sisend akong activity by tomorrow. Tomorrow na after na ng lesson ng lahat ng grade 8 tomorrow.